Well, extremely uncertain times in Iran and in Greenland as well, it does appear. Joining us now, a very special guest, John Bolton, the former National Security Advisor of the United States. Mr. Bolton, thanks very much for speaking to me once again. Great seeing you, and a Happy New Year. My first question to you.
Happy New Year.
With Iran's protests now surging and crackdowns killing thousands, is an American military strike, in your opinion, inevitable? And if it is, what would that really achieve?
Well, it certainly sounds as though President Trump is moving in the direction of what they like to call kinetic military action. He said a number of things that really have been effectively drawing a red line. If the regime doesn't stop the repression of the people, which has escalated in recent days, he's going to do something. Now, it would be helpful if we could decide what the objective is. I think it's a legitimate objective to overthrow the regime, which is a threat to peace and security around the world, particularly in the Middle East, with its support for international terrorism and its pursuit of nuclear weapons. But what we need to do is show to the opposition that we're with them. I think we should have been helping the opposition in many other non-military ways before this. But if we were to strike targets that are elements of the regime's ability to repress the opposition, like Revolutionary Guard headquarters and facilities, those facilities of the Basij, the militia, the paramilitary group that's used against civilians, the nuclear program, the ballistic missile program. I think that would cause great harm to the regime and be a boost for the opposition.
So, Mr. Bolton, you don't believe that this is bluff on the part of the Trump administration amidst this internal unrest? What the president is saying is credible, and that is just a matter of time now?
I think so. Otherwise, he has put down a red line. If the regime crossed it, which they have, and he doesn't do something, then his own credibility is at stake. I think he has understood, even since the 2016 campaign, when he wanted to get rid of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, in which we did do in 2018, that he understands the Iranian threat. And after all, he did join with Israel in the 12-day war to attack the nuclear weapons program. So he has used military force against the regime before, and I think there's reason to believe he'll do it again.
Where do you see the revolution, and I use that word, in Iran at the moment? Do you believe that there is a very strong possibility that the Khamenei regime will be overturned in a finite period of time, or do you see this being a protracted battle?
Well, we've certainly seen massive demonstrations against the government in a number of past years, but virtually all of which have been brutally repressed. And that seems to be what the regime is trying again here. I do think it's different this time. I think the economic circumstances in Iran are far worse than they've been before. The country, because of its irrigation policies, has caused a near drought across the country. They've been talking about moving the capital from Tehran because there's no water in the city's reservoirs. But there are plenty of other factors, too. The young people know they could have a different life. They're dissatisfied. The female half of the population is unhappy and has been since the murder of Mahsa Amini some years back for her failure to adhere to the dress code. And that's not just a cultural issue. That's a direct attack on the Ayatollah's legitimacy. They say they rule because they speak the word of God. Well, 50% of the population doesn't think they speak the word of God on the dress code, and that undercuts their legitimacy on everything else they say. There are ethnic tensions. There are many, many causes for this. I think the regime knows it's in trouble. I think that's one explanation for the level of brutality we're seeing now.
You know, let me strike a contrarian note. I personally believe that strikes against the IRGC or any element of the armed forces of Iran won't necessarily, do anything for the protesters. That seems to be running parallel to any military action that America may take on the military in Iran. It's the police, other forces, even the armed forces targeting the civilians. But a military strike on military facilities, how would that have an impact on protesters on the ground?
Well, I think the real control of the government in Iran today is not in the hands of the Ayatollah Khamenei. I really think it's as much a military dictatorship as it is a theocracy. And so striking the Revolutionary Guard is really a direct attack on the people who are ordering the campaign of repression that we're seeing now. And as I mentioned, the Basij in particular, the militias, the really gangs of thugs, are the ones immediately most threatening to the protesters, and taking them out would be important too. But going after, for example, further attacks on the nuclear weapons program, I think if you look back to the 12-day war, the people of Iran saw that the regime was unable to protect its most important assets, the nuclear program, the missile program. And it really, nobody likes to see their country bombed, but it gave the people the feeling the regime's days were numbered. And I think we want to underline that. We have to show both to the regime and to the opposition that the outside world has stakes here in what the outcome of this conflict is.
Do you see Raza Pahlavi as the natural leader who could take over? Does he enjoy, the popular support, which he may believe he does?
I'm doubtful of that. I don't know what the most effective way to proceed is here. I think ultimately the people of Iran are going to have to make up their decision through free and fair elections who they want to lead them. I think it's a mistake at this point to concentrate on who's leading the opposition. It's certainly disorganized. It certainly needs better coordination. But I think we should all keep our focus on overthrowing the regime itself. There'll be plenty of time for political squabbles over who's going to lead the country afterward. But if the opposition divides now, it weakens itself and gives the regime a greater opportunity to stay in power.
Is it your concern that if America strikes or is about to strike, Iran may actually launch, a large number of ballistic missiles, much, to two civilian areas, not just in Israel, but places like Qatar and the United Arab Emirates and everywhere else where the United States has bases? That we could see a lot of loss of life if that takes place.
Well, I think we certainly have to take the potential regime retaliation seriously, and it may be that there's some indications now at some of our bases in the Gulf that non-essential personnel are leaving. I think it would be a big mistake for Iran to attack population centers in the Arab countries on the other side of the Gulf. I do think if they're considering anything, it would be against our bases. I think Israel is vulnerable, and I think there's certainly a risk of Iran expanding its assassination campaign against people in the Iranian diaspora or against current and former U.S. officials that they've targeted before. So I think we need to be prepared for that. But I do think this regime is very weak, and I don't think we should let this moment go. The next one may come, to answer one of your earlier questions, when the Ayatollah Khamenei himself dies. He's 85, 86 years old. He's not in good health. And he's only the second supreme leader since the revolution of 1979. So I think that's a point where they have to pick a new supreme leader that the regime would be vulnerable, even if they don't fall as a result of the current turmoil.
Let's turn our attention to the other real crisis area, Greenland. Trump calls Greenland's status unacceptable. He will not rule out force. How does this fit, for example, with your America First, Arctic strategy? You've spoken about America First, but it's being used or in a very different manner now.
Well, I think the way Trump's approaching this is just disastrous for the United States. I think even talking about using military force against a treaty ally like Denmark and the people of Greenland is unthinkable until Trump thinks it up and starts talking about it. When Trump first raised this idea to me in 2018, I asked the staff of the National Security Council to study Greenland and what might be appropriate, and they did a lot of work. There's a long history of concern for Greenland in the United States. During World War II, for example, we had 16 military bases on Greenland to protect the North Atlantic convoy routes. And there's a vehicle, the 1951 Defense of Greenland Treaty between the U.S. and Denmark. That's a vehicle to do almost everything I think Trump wants to do. So if we could take this issue out of the political rhetoric and the spotlight and just have representatives of the two countries and the Greenland people talk about this, we can come up with something that will provide security against the Chinese and Russian threats in the Arctic, not just for the United States and Denmark, but for Canada and all other NATO members.
So, one way or the other, that's what Donald Trump is saying. Does that threaten to break NATO? I mean, if America were to occupy Greenland or force Greenland away from Denmark, would that mark the end of NATO?
I think it could. I think it's just inconceivable that we would do anything like that. There's a poll out this morning that shows exactly 8% of the people of the U.S. in favor of using military force against Greenland. Of course, I'm not sure that 8% knows where Greenland is, but it's a tiny, tiny number of people. And I don't think ultimately Trump will do it. This is just the way he behaves, and he has no concept that his behavior harms the United States as it is now, in costing us the trust and confidence and good faith, not just within NATO, but around the world, that any president could talk about invading a treaty ally.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that ultimately he won't do it. Is that really your belief? Because if you look at his rhetoric, he's put himself in a position where he's almost bound to act.
Well, he has an amazing capacity to engage in that kind of rhetoric, not get what he wants, but still declare victory.
Right.
And I'm confident we can find something here that will allow him to say, I got exactly what I wanted, even if it's not anything close to what he wanted.
How vital is American control of Greenland to counter Russia and China in the Arctic? Because that's ostensibly one of the big reasons this is, we're talking about this. Is it really as big a threat to America as it's being made out to be?
Yeah, I think it is. With the melting of the polar ice cap, things become possible that have not been possible for a long time. Just considering our side of the Arctic Ocean, the melting ice has opened what for 200 years Americans have called the Northwest Passage, north of Canada and through the Bering Strait into the Pacific Ocean. Russia has a comparable passage. So what we face now is increased Russian activity in a region they have long paid a lot more attention to than we have, and are much better equipped in terms of icebreakers and so on than we are, but also to the Chinese. And I say this to our European friends, imagine a Chinese fleet coming through the Bering Strait between Alaska and Siberia, sailing across the Arctic and emerging in the North Atlantic. That should be enough to get everybody's attention. There are also threats potentially to the mineral reserves on Greenland. We've seen how China uses the Belt and Road Initiative to take advantage of developing countries. We don't want that to happen to Greenland. These are legitimate security interests. And as I say, not just for the United States, but really for all of NATO.
Mr. Bolton, a final question. Going back to the Iran situation, with 50% tariffs for Russian oil and new 25% penalties for trading with Iran, India potentially finds itself in a situation where there's 75% tariffs. It seems to be going out of control. Now, India has historic ties with Iran, and of course we've got great ties with Israel as well. We control the Chabahar port. We want that gateway to Central Asia and to Afghanistan, most certainly. America has given us a waiver in the recent past. But at a time when we are talking about a trade deal with America, the threat of another 25% in the context of India makes things difficult. Would you agree?
Yeah, look, I think Trump's tariff policy is another disaster for the United States. I don't think it's gained us anything economically except an increase by stealth in taxes on American consumers. I think it's harmed our economic position. It's certainly harmed our political position. I don't know that the 25% tariff related to Iran is anything but bluster. But again, it's the kind of behavior by Trump that doesn't produce anything positive for the United States, only produces negatives. We have a lot to talk about with India. These tariffs are getting in the way of it. And I'm hoping any day now the Supreme Court may rescue us from these tariffs if they declare them invalid. But we have to try and find a way for at least certainly between India and the United States to focus on big strategic questions and not lose our opportunity here fighting over tariff levels.